What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Turnbuckle Topics Podcast. I'm your host, Pat Deneen, and this is my review of Friday Night SmackDown. And this is big, all right? This is night one of the WWE Draft 2023 Draft, and we're hoping to see some big things happen, some major changes, hoping for a refresh, a restart for a lot of these men and women, whether they're in singles, whether they're tag teams, whether they're in catering. To be quite honest with you, we want to see a rejuvenated roster, and that's the whole point of this. That's why Triple H has been saying since last month, since the Raw after Mania, around then when we would be getting this. And look, here it is. So let's get started with SmackDown, and throughout, of course, I'll go over the draft picks of night one, what I think, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So this took place in Corpus Christi, Texas. Starts off with the game. Triple H, referred to as WWE Hall of Famer now, since the Raw after Mania. He's no longer being referred to, announced, or shown on screen as the Chief Content Officer. So hopefully he is still making a lot of those big decisions as he says he is, and it's been documented over the last few weeks or month that he still is in charge of a lot, including creative. Even though Vince obviously has been, getting involved with it over the last several months. But look, that's for another day. So let's stay on topic here. Anyway, he welcomes everyone to Friday Night SmackDown into the 2023 WWE Draft. Goes on to say 50% of the roster drafted tonight, and the other half will be drafted Monday night on Raw. So he says, time to shake things up a bit and make them a bit more exciting. He couldn't be more true with that statement. We're all yearning for that in WWE. So he starts off with the first pick to SmackDown, Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, and Paul Heyman. Now, this is very interesting. The Usos, Jimmy and Jey Uso, who Roman has not really spoken to or confronted, as far as I'm concerned, up until this very moment, to this recording, yet since WrestleMania, since the Usos lost their tag titles, their undisputed tag titles, to KO and Sami Zayn on night one, April 1st. So yeah, that leads us to wonder what's going to happen with the Usos there. The first pick to Monday Night Raw, though, is Cody Rhodes. A lot of people were upset. Oh, Roman's on SmackDown. Cody's on Raw. There's a new title on Raw. How is Cody ever going to finish the story? Is he just going to settle for this WWE World Heavyweight Championship? Calm down. I don't think he's going to win this championship that's on Raw. I think he will eventually take down Roman Reigns, even though in the last week or so, there's been a lot of reports coming out that says, if not SummerSlam, August 5th at Ford Field in Detroit, Michigan, then potentially at WrestleMania 40 next April in Philadelphia, Lincoln Financial Field. Now, hopefully, from my personal opinion, it happens at SummerSlam. The more time goes on and the more things progress, last couple of days, last couple of weeks, I'm thinking that it may not be at SummerSlam. Initially at WrestleMania a month ago, I would have told you, yeah, he's going to finish the story at SummerSlam, no doubt about it. But a whole other year. I mean, look, I don't mind some great storytelling and being patient and waiting, but I don't know. It's looking like it may be that way. So we'll have to wait and see, obviously. Second pick for SmackDown is the Raw Women's Champion, Bianca Belair. Here's another head scratcher. Why are we drafting the Raw Women's Champion to SmackDown? Have we not learned how bad it went a year and a half ago when Becky and Charlotte were said champions for each brand, had the switch, the title swap went terrible on SmackDown. And I get it, they had real life tension and all this other stuff. So one would assume that if Bianca does retain, and Rhea does retain as well at Backlash this Saturday, if they are still Raw and SmackDown Women's Champions, that if there is a title swap, hopefully they'll be cordial about it and they could go about their business. But I really am so against champions, the main champions, being drafted to another brand when they're, Bianca's going on a historic reign. If I'm not mistaken, she's tied with Becky Lynch at this very moment in time as far as the longest reigning Raw Women's Champion. And on the day of Backlash, I think she'll be the longest reigning Raw Women's Champion of all time. So with that being said, why would you then, even though she will get the record done no matter what, have her go to SmackDown and take that title? It's just silly. I mean, look, Io obviously could beat her. We can know that Io or Rhea, regardless of the probability, Io could take down Bianca, and obviously Zelina could possibly take down Rhea. But look, we'll see. We'll have to wait for that to happen. But anyway, again, long story short, not a fan of doing that. I think if you're the said champion for that brand, you should not be able to leave that brand as long as you are the champion. Mid-card titles, it's a little different. Austin Theory, U.S. champion, Gunther, Intercontinental champion. Those I could see because you're not representing the brand as a whole. But when there is that title of being the Raw Women's Champion or the SmackDown Women's Champion, It shouldn't be a thing. So anyway, moving on here. Speaking of Becky Lynch, the second pick for Raw is Becky Lynch, and this concludes the first round. So now the Usos congratulate Roman and company on being selected first in the draft. This is via a promo, not Roman in person. They then go on to say that they haven't heard from him since WrestleMania. Look, we texted you, we called you, no DM back, no email back, didn't send a smoke signal, a letter in a bottle, nothing. And then they say KO and Sammy are the twos and they are the ones. Now, look, the Usos can make anything funny. Jimmy and Jay, they're just so great on the mics. Even a serious segment talking about, look, we haven't heard from the tribal chief, the head of the table, in the better part of a month. They made it a funny moment in time. As they always do. So as soon as they said Sammy and KO's music hits, they make their way out to confront the Usos. Sammy says, you don't think it's strange that you haven't heard from the tribal chief, Roman Reigns, in the better part of a month since Mania, since we took these titles from you, and that he hasn't said a single word to you since you lost, and you're going to go ahead and dedicate this title match to Roman, this tag title match against us? That's, what are you doing here? And you weren't drafted to the bloodline, if that doesn't tell you everything you need to know. And Jimmy goes on to say, once we beat you and put an end to your title reign, that will be the end of this. And KO says, I'm so sick of this. I'm so sick of this crap. All that matters is we beat you guys. We beat the hell out of you, as a matter of fact, later on tonight, and we retain our tag team titles. So that's the main event of SmackDown, which we'll get to. We have a matchup here, LA Knight versus Butch of the Brawling Brutes, where LA Knight got the victory here. Moving on to the second round, RVD, he's in the building, as well as Michael P.S. Hayes. They're the special presenters. P.S. Hayes of the Freebirds to announce round two. Now, first pick of round two, SmackDown selects the Street Profits. Raw went and selected all three members of Imperium. That's huge. Raw getting the Intercontinental Champion, Gunther, Giovanni Vinci, and Ludwig Kaiser. So I'm glad that Imperium went as a whole, as they should. So the IC title moves over to Monday Night Raw. So likely the US title will be making its way to SmackDown, Austin Theory, as I just mentioned the two. Now, after that pick, SmackDown selects Edge. That's very interesting. Edge has been on Raw, as far as I can recall, the last 3 years since he's been back in 2020, returning at that Royal Rumble. And so that's going to be interesting seeing him on SmackDown, where he was many years ago. And then we had Matt Riddle to complete round two, going and actually staying on Monday Night Raw. So it was nice to see RVD was there and Riddle was there, and from one bro to another, they like to roll one up. I'm sure they did that night. So anyway, the Street Profits make their way out and say, we want the smoke. Speaking of which, the smoke. Ricochet's music hits, along with his longtime tag team partner, Braun Strowman. Then we have Cruz del Toro, Joaquin Wild, making their way out, LWO members. We have a triple threat tag team match here. We have Montez Ford with the Frog Splash on the Ricochet for the 1-2-3. Very good match. Giving them the momentum they need to start off their tenure on the blue brand. So good for them, man. Good for the Street Profits. Of course, when we saw, they usually keep couples together. They do give them that respect the last few years in WWE. Where there's Becky, there's Seth. Where there's Bianca, there's Montez, and so on. So I'm happy to see that. This was a fun match. Now, next up, round three, we have JBL coming out on the SmackDown side of things. Teddy Long doing the announcements for Raw here. So round three of the WWE Draft, first pick of the third round, the almighty Bobby Lashley going to SmackDown. Raw selects the Scottish Warrior, Drew McIntyre. SmackDown selects all four members of the OC. And Raw selects The Miz. Thus far, no faction, no tag team has been split up, so that's always good to see. Even though I do like a change of pace, nobody's been definitively split as of this moment in time. So look, the Usos, again, did not go with the Bloodline, so we'll have to see where they end up. And but the Street Profits, Imperium, and the OC have all remained together. So now we have a singles match, a women's match. Zelina Vega, who will be challenging Rhea Ripley for her Raw Women's Championship in Puerto Rico, going up against Sonya Deville. She's with Chelsea Green. Vega got the roll up on Deville for the win, but was attacked by her Backlash opponent, like I just mentioned, Ripley, coming out. However, Rhea went for her Riptide, but Zelina countered with a beautiful DDT, landed it perfectly. So that was good to see. And look, man, I know it's highly unlikely that Zelina Vega is going to defeat Rhea Ripley Saturday. But that being said, I couldn't be more happy for her being part of this LWO stable with Rey Mysterio, of course, formerly known as Legado del Fantasma, with Santos Escobar and the guys the last few months when she joined them on the main roster, filling in for Elektra Lopez from NXT. And then again, getting Rey leading this LWO faction the past month or so, and then being able to go in Puerto Rico She is Puerto Rican, Zelina Vega, and try to win this Raw Women's Championship. This is a big deal. This is obviously the best moment of her wrestling career, without question, bar none. So good for Zelina. I'm sure it will be a great match, regardless of the end result. So anyway, we had a great segment backstage at this moment in time with Rey Mysterio, Zelina Vega, and Santos Escobar, all of which who I was just talking about. And Rey encourages Vega for her title match. He mentioned how he was always the smaller wrestler going up against his opponents, but still found a way to become a WWE Hall of Famer, decorated champion, etc. So it's not about the size of the dog in the fight, he says, but the size of the fight in the dog. Just really good to see. Again, just a beautiful moment for the group collectively. You could see how much Zelina Vega appreciated it. Yeah, these things are scripted per se, but the words, the moments, the meaning behind it was so authentic, so real. And again, I couldn't be happy for all of them collectively. So now we have the OC that is back from obscurity, and finally, it's nice seeing Meechin back with Gallows and Anderson, and AJ Styles has returned. He's been out for a very long time with an injury. I forget what injury it was, but we haven't seen him in months. And look, it couldn't have been more of a lackluster return. No fault of their own on commentary. Michael Cole and Wade Barrett, but I do blame Cole because he's the mainstay. He's the lead commentator on SmackDown, so he's the one that usually has the majority of the emotion and all that stuff, the element of excitement. So there was none. I mean, AJ Styles is back. He's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, one of the greatest in the company. So I mean, how do you not be excited for AJ Styles? He treated him just like one of the other members. Was not a fan of that. Obviously, social media picked up on that immediately. So anyway, again, haven't seen everybody in a very long time. They get in the ring before Styles could speak. The Viking Raiders came out with Valhalla and made their way to the ring. They beat down the Raiders and say, SmackDown, we are just getting started. You got to remember, when they did the initial brand splits back in 2016, AJ Styles, of course, had only been with the company a few months, debuting at the Royal Rumble in 2016. And Styles was drafted to SmackDown, and he remained there for the better part of maybe 2 or 3 years. And he would always say, SmackDown Live is the house that AJ Styles built. Granted, it's not, it's live SmackDown, and it's been run live ever since then, but it's no longer SmackDown Live ever since they moved to Fox, leaving USA Network. But nonetheless, hey, this is the house that AJ Styles built, and I hope he really gets some momentum and significant feuds. I really do. So anyway, and then he hit Ivar with a phenomenal forearm to wrap it up after Gallows, Anderson, and Meechin beat the hell out of everybody in the ring. So now coming up with the draft here, we got the fourth and final round of Friday night. Shawn Michaels representing SmackDown, Road Dogg representing Raw. This was exciting, coming out to the D-Generation X theme music. Great, love it, live for it. And, seeing Shawn, I expect to hear an NXT call-up. At this moment in time, there's been no call-ups in the first 3 rounds, which was very surprising to me. But seeing Shawn Michaels, I expected fully, whether it was 1, 2, 3, whomever, how many people would be announced at this 4th round. I said there's got to be somebody, and who better than HBK to do it? It's only right. So anyway, he starts off with saying that SmackDown selects all 3 members of Damage Control. So Io, Dakota, and the leader Bayley going to SmackDown. This was after Bayley had teased Bianca Belair earlier on in the show on Twitter. I believe she wrote bye 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 or something like that. Yeah, she put up an NSYNC gif saying bye bye bye, but she's back on SmackDown with Bianca, so those two can't seem to escape one another regardless what they do. So anyway, going on to the next pick, Raw selects Shinsuke Nakamura. Then SmackDown selects the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. Now, this one came out of left field, folks. It's not that they're not great and can't hang on the main roster, don't get me wrong. But they are the NXT Tag Team Champions, the Women's Tag Champs, so I didn't think they were going to move up any champions to the main roster. Again, I don't know what they're doing with the women. They have Bianca, the SmackDown, the Raw Women's Champion, going to SmackDown. Then you have the NXT Tag Team Champions coming up to the main roster with the titles. It doesn't make sense. So as happy as I am for Alba and Isla, much of a surprise. I don't see anybody having them coming up. We thought maybe Kaden and Katana. That's the tag team that comes to mind. They've been in NXT for the better part of 4 years, probably longer, but that's just as long as they've been there as a tag team. Actually, the day of or the night before the draft, Kate and Carter went and put something on her Instagram saying then versus now, side by side picture of when they started till present day. And then goes 4 years in the making, my day one and my forever tag team partner. No matter the obstacles, we always got each other. And so it's such a beautiful thing to see not only a great tag team together, work great together in the ring and on the mic, but they're actually best friends in real life. So I can only imagine how much fun they have working alongside one another. So again, very surprising hearing these as the first NXT call-ups. After that, we had another selection. We had this was actually the final selection of the draft, and this was also surprising. We had a back-to-back NXT call-up, NXT champions. So again, Alba and Isla going to SmackDown, but the Raw, Monday Night Raw rather, is getting the NXT Women's Champion, Indy Hartwell. Now, if you thought the tag team was a head scratcher, this really had me confused because I said, all right, well, a few days back, she potentially injured herself significantly in that triple threat match against Tiffany Stratton and Roxanne Perez. And now is she able to even go in the ring right now and defend her title? And B, now you're bringing her up to the main roster. Again, not saying she's not deserving of it. She did her time in NXT. She'd been there, 4 or 5 years maybe? And but what are we doing here? But why are we changing all the champions to different brands or bringing them up? So very confusing, although very happy for all involved. So anyway, that was very, very confusing. So as soon as Alba and Isla were drafted in the NXT draft room back there, Kaden Carter and Katana Chance went up to them immediately, confronting them and said, "Look, don't think you're leaving NXT with those tag team championships. We want a shot at them Tuesday." And so that's what's bound to happen. And I couldn't help but notice too, and it was driving me nuts, that obviously Michael Cole is not very familiar with Isla Dawn, nor has he watched much NXT ever. He kept calling her Isla Dawn. It was driving me nuts. He said once, I was like, all right, everybody makes a slip up, has a slip up. But dude, like, come on. First of all, there was no excitement for AJ Styles when he returned earlier in the show. Now you're calling Isla Dawn Isla Dawn numerous times. I said, that's strike two, my man. Strike three. I don't know what I was about to do. My Twitter fingers were getting crazy. A keyboard warrior almost came out of me. Anyway, moving on here. Now we have Karrion Kross, who goes on to attack the newest member of Monday Night Raw, Shinsuke Nakamura, during a backstage interview with Caleb Braxton, trying to get Shinsuke's thoughts on him being drafted to Monday Night Raw. So that was that brief encounter with them. They may have a match on this week's edition of SmackDown, Kross and Nakamura, before Nakamura makes his way to Raw Monday, May 8th. So main event time, believe it or not. Main event, we have a WrestleMania rematch, as I discussed earlier on in the show. This was, again, the main event of night one of WrestleMania on April 1st. The Usos, Jimmy and Jey Uso, going up against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, also known as the undisputed WWE Tag Team Champions. So right before this is about to happen, Paul Heyman had gotten a call alongside Solo Sikoa that ends up being Roman Reigns. Heyman says, "Yes, my tribal chief," before hanging up, goes to Solo. That's the call. Tonight's your night. Solo then walks out of the camera's view. I'm wondering what's happening here. What are we doing? So anyway, Solo Sikoa walks out, gets stopped immediately by Matt Riddle, completely taken out of the equation from the very beginning, which is great. So Solo wasn't even able to, never mind make his way ringside, but he wasn't even able to make his way down to the ramp. So that was that. Sammy ends up hitting Jimmy Uso with the haluva kick to wrap this thing up and get the win. Now the Usos, they're in trouble. They're in trouble with the tribal chief, without question. This much is for certain. I mean, they lost twice in the month of April, the very beginning and the very end. Initially at WrestleMania, losing those tag team titles and then losing the rematch to get them back right before they are to meet with Roman in the foreseeable future and to redeem themselves going into the month of May. Now, this match went about 20 minutes, and as SmackDown went off air, the look of uncertainty on the Usos' faces, namely Jey Uso, was evident. It was very evident, very concerning, knowing they're in trouble, to say the least, lack of a better word. So that was interesting, and that was pretty much that. So, this coming edition of SmackDown, we have Shinsuke Nakamura again going up against Karrion Kross. Also, Bad Bunny is set to make an appearance the night before his San Juan street fight, being that they will be in Puerto Rico already, going up against Damian Priest at the Judgment Day. And so Yeah, that's pretty much that. So look, here's a brief rundown of what I had just mentioned for who was drafted. So SmackDown, they got the Bloodlines: Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, Paul Heyman, Raw Women's Champion Bianca Belair, the Street Profits Montez Ford, and Angelo Dawkins, Edge, Bobby Lashley, the OC, which is AJ Styles, Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, and Mishin, Damage Control, Bailey, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky, Alba Fire, and Isla Dawn. That's a hell of a loaded roster without question. So they did very well. Monday Night Raw received Cody Rhodes, Becky Lynch, Imperium, Gunther, who's the Intercontinental Champion, Ludwig Kaiser, Giovanni Vinci, Matt Riddle, Drew McIntyre, The Miz, Shinsuke Nakamura, and Indy Hartwell. Now, look, I'm not going bit for bit, tit for tat here, but I will say that, in my opinion, I think as well as Raw did with Cody and Gunther, to say the least, and then obviously they got Drew, Shinsuke, and all that. I'm going to give the nod to SmackDown without a doubt. I think they not only did they receive a little bit more in the amount of people, personnel, but I think they got the better out of this deal thus far in the first half of the draft. So those are who I have to go to or go for at this very moment in time. So we come to find out that after SmackDown, there are still some more eligible names from Friday night's roster selection that were still eligible to be drafted to Raw or to SmackDown or potentially even be called up from NXT. Obviously, they weren't going to mention the NXT names being potential call-ups, but the names eligible for both Monday Night Raw and SmackDown that were going to be made, these picks were going to be made by Saturday morning. A continuation from Friday's draft. So some of the names that were still eligible going into Friday night, Saturday morning was Candice LeRae, Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, Dexter Loomis, Dolph Ziggler, Hit Row, being Top Dollar, Shante the Adonis, B-Fab, Lacey Evans, Maximum Male Models, Marseille, Mansois, and Maxine, Mustafa Ali, Natalia, Omos and MVP, Viking Raiders, and Valhalla. So we found out actually shortly thereafter. I don't even think we had to wait very long. I think by midnight we had found out that who was added to what roster. So as far as I see here, SmackDown also went and added Ashanti the Adonis, Top Dollar, and BFAB. They added the entirety of Hit Row, so that's another faction or group that did make it, did get to stay together. They also added Lacey Evans to the women's division, and from what I see here, that was it. I think Monday Night Raw got the vast majority of additions post SmackDown on Friday night. They also received the likes of Maximum Male Models, Mansois, Marseille, and Maxine Dupree. They got all three again. Another group or faction, notable or not, that is staying together on Monday Night Raw, where they've been for the last month or two, ever since they were kind of quietly moved over from SmackDown. We also come to find out that the Viking Raiders also staying together. Eric, Ivar, and Valhalla. They're moving from SmackDown to Monday Night Raw. Now we also got to see that Candice LeRae, Chelsea Green, and Sonya Deville, all three added to the Raw Women's division, and Natalia. So outside of that, I think there was only two others, very notables, too, that were added to the Monday Night Raw roster. And I'm going to start with the Irish Ace, JD McDonough, formerly known as Jordan Devlin prior to the pandemic. And he was drafted to Monday Night Raw. He writes with the graphic here, 21 years, made it. So couldn't be more happy for him. It's been rumored for some time, especially the last few days, that he could be the fifth member of Judgment Day when he makes his way to Monday Night Raw. He does have history with Finn Balor. I believe he was even trained or coached by him at one point in time. And so that's very interesting. I think he'd be a great fit for Judgment Day. Definitely has the attitude. We know that. So he would fit perfect with that group. So very happy for JD McDonough. All the best to him on Monday Night Raw. He's going to do great. And could not be happier for this young lady because, again, I've said for the past year, ever since she returned from that gruesome knee injury after being a former WWE, or shall I say NXT Women's Tag Team Champion with Io Sky, or Io Shirai at the time, a year or two ago, Zoe Stark. Zoe Stark, I thought she should have got NXT Women's Championship gold. I thought she could have won the main title on a few occasions. But anyway, she was also drafted to Monday Night Raw. She writes on Twitter with the graphic, much like JD McDonough, she writes, 11 years ago, I started chasing my dreams, and now it's time to show the world what I can do, DND. Not to be confused with Britt Baker, DMD. She's not a dentist, but she writes DND, dreams never die. So honestly, very happy for Zoe Stark. Obviously, thrilled for her. She's been working heel for quite a few months now. And again, babyface, heel doesn't matter. I kind of like an edge to her, and she's got an amazing finisher. I think she finally named it, but it's brutal, and I love it. So I think she's going to do great on the main roster, singles or tag. But honestly, I want to see her absolutely tear it up in the singles division. I think she'll do great. So a shout out to them, JD McDonough and Zoe Stark also being moved up. Um, on Friday Night SmackDown, but both going to the Monday Night Raw brand, the red brand. So shout out to them. That's fantastic. It's a shame too that Indy Hartwell. I mean, it's a good thing, right? That it's a good problem to have that she's going to Monday Night Raw. But I believe the day of the draft, she had posted a picture on Twitter that she literally had just gotten her side plates after a week or two. Actually, she had been champ since Stand and Deliver. So after numerous weeks of being champion, she got the new side plates on her NXT title, Women's Championship. Indy Hartwell. Now here she is. Her title situation's up in the air. Is she injured? She's going to Raw. So all these different variables. But you know what? At the end of the day, she could say, "Look, I did it," and so that's all that matters. Also saw a very interesting graphic of three women. Now, obviously, we know Alba Fire and Isla Dawn are going to SmackDown, the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions. But I also saw a picture of Piper Niven in this graphic, and I think the three of them would make an absolutely awesome faction, and it would finally give Piper some identity on the main roster. Obviously, the last year or two, she was Dewdrop alongside Eva Marie. That was a mess, at least early on. Then she remained Dewdrop. And then, they kind of teased some stuff with her and Nikki ASH for a while, but it went nowhere. Didn't see her for weeks and months. But anyway, I would love to see maybe the three of them mix it up. I think that would be a great stables. That's something I definitely wanted to make mention of. And how about this for a fun fact? Speaking of Bobby Lashley going to SmackDown now, the last person to beat Roman Reigns clean, emphasis on clean, was Bobby Lashley. This was sometime in 2019. I believe, or late 2018, early 2019, something like that. And so that would be something. Bobby Lashley, Roman Reigns, how about that? Now, the last person to actually defeat Roman Reigns, it wasn't clean, was Baron Corbin. So I don't know what persona he was doing at the time. I know he wasn't doing Happy Corbin, but whatever he was doing at the time, he had beat Roman Reigns. But clean was Lashley. So that would be a good matchup. I'd love to see that one. Obviously, I'm sure it's something Lashley would be up for completely. Now, the women's tag team division, as it could stand at this very moment in time, we have Isla and Alba, we have Dakota and Io, we have Liv and Raquel, who are the current champions. We have Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville. And then, of course, with Indy Hartwell coming up to Monday Night Raw, and who else has just been drafted to Raw, Candice LeRae will be staying there too. Again, they haven't had a lot for Candice LeRae in the past, really, month or two, honestly, but especially the past month. They canceled her and Piper Niven's segments on a couple of occasions. Thank you, Vince. I would love to see Candice LeRae out there. She's great. Even though she's a little soft-spoken, she is great either as a babyface or a heel, which we've gotten to see both in NXT. On the main roster, she's pretty much ran babyface the last several months. But we can see a reunion of sorts in a tag team realm. I think it would benefit Indy greatly. I wouldn't throw Indy in there as a singles superstar right away. I'd kind of, get her incorporated in a tag team division. Hell, we know the women's tag team division could use tag teams. So I think the putting, Indy Hartwell and Candice LeRae together would be great. The way I've heard rumors of, now that we're getting them, they're all on the main roster now and all on Monday Night Raw primarily. You could put Johnny Gargano and Dexter Lumis and Indy Hartwell and Candice LeRae together. You could have the Way reunite, whether it is babyface, whether they do turn heel. You could put them together. So I think that would be a lot of fun doing so. Anything else? I think that I know there's something else. Oh yes, I have to mention the current free agents, I guess you could say. So the free agents that are not exclusive to Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown at this very moment in time are Omos, MVP, his manager, Mustafa Ali, Dolph Ziggler, and I guess you could say another unofficial, well, it's an official call-up, but he's just not exclusive to a brand, call-up from NXT, Von Wagner. I've mentioned this on previous podcasts that Von Wagner is somebody that the company's been eyeing up lately, or maybe even quite some time, but it's come out lately that they see, big things for Von Wagner. He's huge, I get it. Not crazy about him. Do I think he's improved in the ring, over the past year or two? Absolutely. Is he great on the mic? Not really. Do big men need to be great on the mic? Not really. especially if you put them with a good manager like a Paul Heyman or an MVP. You really don't need to say much. But we'll see. That remains to be seen. So the jury's out. So those are the 5 free agents after SmackDown's draft: Omos, MVP, Mustafa Ali, Dolph Ziggler, and Von Wagner. So yeah, outside of that, man, I think that was pretty much the gist. So I know that I mentioned prior to talking about who was added to the Raw and SmackDown roster after SmackDown's actual draft. They did the late night picks, I guess you could say, the call ups from NXT and all that other stuff. I gave SmackDown the immediate advantage, and I'm still going to stick with SmackDown winning the first half of the draft, even though Raw has tons of great talent, as I mentioned earlier, especially 2 major NXT call ups in Zoe Stark to the women's division and JD McDonough to the men's division on Raw. Those are going to be great additions. But SmackDown collectively as a whole, I still think they got the better end of the deal. But we're going to see. Raw getting quite a bit of European wrestlers there. We got, Gunther, Ludwig, Giovanni, Imperium unto itself. We got JD McDonough, Drew McIntyre. So, it's really interesting to see what's going to happen over there on Monday Night Raw, especially with that new title. Approaching that tournament that's going to culminate at May 27th, Night of Champions for that new WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Now, after SmackDown, she's Lacey Lane, her indie name on Twitter, but her handles at WWE Caden Carter, one half of Caden, and Katana wrote, "Sometimes wrestling hurts, and not just in the ring." So obviously disappointed for sure that her and Katana at this very moment in time were not drafted to either Raw or SmackDown, especially as being a legitimate tag team for the last 4 years in NXT. And then, what a slap in the face, even though they are the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, don't get me wrong, but seeing a tag team be called up from NXT that's only been together for, 3 months, 4 months, because prior to that, Alba Fire and Isla Dawn were feuding earlier in the year or going into the new year, December, January. So even though they make a great duo, they're probably like, man, what the hell's that about? So you would assume that Caden and Katana would win those tag team titles off of them, but you never know. Crazier things have happened. And folks, I think that's pretty much all I got for you here on this SmackDown review and the first round, going over the first round that took place of the 2023 WWE Draft. And before I get out of here, 2 years since Roman Reigns' new theme song debuted. I think we all agree that it was much needed, that he, being the tribal chief and the head of the table, he needed that new epic theme music. It was now, of course, it was debuted, being that it was in April still. It was in the Thunderdome, and it was against Daniel Bryan. And not only was this against Daniel Bryan in the Thunderdome, but this was also Daniel Bryan's final match with WWE before leaving the company. And then 5 months or so later, obviously, debuting with AEW. And that was, left a lot of people surprised that Daniel Bryan did make the leap after being with WWE for all those years, made that debut the very same night as Ruby Soho and Adam Cole at All Out. So that was exciting stuff. That's all I got for you here today, folks. So thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Turnbuckle Topics podcast. I'm your host, Pat Deneen. And thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.